Rex, did you know that on January 18th, 1967, the original Batman television show ran an episode where the Joker turned all of Gotham City's water supply into strawberry jelly?
I wasn't quite around yet, but I love the Adam West show. I kind of wonder if our guest, Kristin Demoranville, a cybersecurity practitioner who specializes in food sector protection, has ever, considered this very, very realistic possibility. That's my question.
That show didn't run for that long, so I love that idea that they were already jumping the shark with like preposterous. They could have just done a kidnapping or like a bank robbery, right? Instead, they're already going to the Jell-O, turning the water supply to Jell-O. It's fantastic.
I do like that they use strawberry jelly because that is the best jelly. And that was season 2, Jack. I think it ran for 4 or 5 years. That was season 2.
It was the only time I watched that show was when I was sick as a kid. That was just happened. I don't know what the people in suburban New Jersey were thinking, that like this is what people who are home at 10 a.m. on a Monday, they want to watch 2 episodes back to back of a show that, of this. This is what they want. This is what they give the people what they want. Exactly. But look, I mean, the concept of water safety, food security is huge. And, the government is approaching it, the federal government is approaching it from a whole bunch of sectors. And we'll ask our guest about that today. But there was the EPA had put out, the Environmental Protection Agency had put out a memorandum earlier in the spring that would have required the public water systems to include cybersecurity as part of these periodic system audits that they have to do. But they yanked it out. They yanked it away in October because Missouri, Arkansas, and Iowa challenged it. Right. So there's this idea that the EPA was trying to make auditing the cybersecurity a big part of it, but there was a lot of pressure from the industry to pull back on it. I don't think the industry said cybersecurity isn't important. I think it was just we don't have maybe the resources to do this. Right.
Is it unusual for someone? Because I mean, you're in the law world.
Yeah.
Like once somebody challenges to just say, don't really want to land in court here. Let me rethink this.
Yeah, it's not, right? So I think when there's a difference between a rule, a regulation, and there's guidance, and each of them has different legal standing and harder or easier on that spectrum to create an actual challenge in court. But what happened here was there were 2 pretty powerful and I think considered reasonable industry players, the American Water Works and the National Rural Water Association, that were at least quoted in a couple of the sort of public articles on this one, apart from the legal challenge that the states made. What they were basically saying was, look, let's have this be a collaborative approach, an industry-driven approach like has happened in other sectors. It doesn't have to be sort of a static requirement. I mean, fair enough, right, Rex? I mean, in the work that Cyber Florida does with municipalities around the state, right, it's abundantly clear that there's different levels of resources available. And it's not a great idea to continue to impose from Washington like a very specific way of doing an audit that, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, 80% of, water treatment plants can't touch. They just can't, they can't hope to, right? Why are we starting out with an auditing requirement that nobody will do? And there's also that thing where, okay, if you want to require us to do something, maybe give us some funding to do it.
Okay.
Right? You can't just, right. It's like if I ask my kids, like every morning, I want, I want ham, eggs, bacon prepared for me. They would say, even if we were to accept this, Dad, give me a budget to go purchase ham, eggs, and bacon, right? I'm a child. I don't have the budget to do it. Now, that maybe oversimplifies it, but that's a little bit, I think, of what was going on here.
Okay.
There's this concept of like, we have these sanitary checks that has to be done for these water utilities. But, oh yeah, by the way, also make sure you do a cybersecurity audit. And they're like, well, okay, with what people, with what money, with what time? Help me through this.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So going to the courts and saying, hey, or challenging this legally, it not only slows it down, but it's a path to say, all right, let's get to the negotiating table, because at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing.
Right.
Nice, safe, clean water.
Yeah. And I think the legal challenges come through the states or even the municipalities directly. Anybody who would have to expend resources to comply, they would argue that they have the ability to seek a legal opinion from the court or a legal ruling from the court on these rights. But then there's also industry conversations that are happening with the regulators, both through the states and through these other industry organizations. And I think where it ended up, and there's a quote from at least I think the article on Cybersecurity Dive, or maybe it was dark reading, but one of the quotes was from Evgeny Goncharov, who's the head of Kaspersky's group that works with these sort of infrastructure sections. He said something about water utility infrastructure is something not that easy to secure because of its diverse and distributed nature. I mean, that's a good point. It's not like it's a concentrated, it's not as if we're mining uranium in a secure facility, right? It's water's everywhere. But what he also said was there's lots of small and mid-sized objects equipped with different OT systems by multiple vendors, normally outdated, his words, with various type remote connection. So think about anything in the water supply chain, which is rivers, estuaries, underground things, right? You've got drilling going on either side. You've got garbage dumps around it. You've got all sorts of inputs, and you've got sensors that are often there's a great documentary from maybe 25 years ago called Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control. And it's about robots, among other things. But a lot of the inputs to the water supply are not highly sophisticated things. They're little environmental sensors that are low cost, so you can put a lot of them out there. And when you have something that's low cost and widely distributed, like, if you think about like the hackability of like a really simple computer, like a Raspberry Pi, right? That's very different from what you could protect in an office infrastructure environment. And so there's a lot of inputs that are in this distributed sort of network that are connected to each other that are really hard to secure. The fact that they're hard to secure should terrify us, which is probably why the EPA was trying to take this action. But at the other hand, you don't want to create a mandate that on day one, all will be in breach of. So it really, we should pay a close attention to it, but we can't fix cybersecurity auditing requirements that without, I think, funding them appropriately in a way that what the EPA is trying to do is let's get some data out there from the auditing process, and let's look at it and decide where we should fund or where we should have further regulation. But it is a little scary that the industry can't do the auditing, given how scary it is. What's going on. But anyway, I think you're seeing some public dialogue between the regulated entities and the EPA, and hopefully it'll turn into something. Now, the USDA ultimately and the FDA might have other portions of where that water ends up. They might have their own regulations. And so you're going to see cybersecurity standards at manufacturing facilities or food facilities. And we'll have a couple questions, I think, for Kristen about that today.
Yeah, what a perfect topic for a perfect guest.
All right. Well, I'm your host, Jack Clabby. I'm a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA. With me today is Rex Wilson. Rex is from Cyber Florida. He's the producer of the No Password Required podcast, and his voice should be familiar to a lot of our listeners from participating in some of our games and doing some of the raps for the program. He's filling in today for Kaylee Melton, who's the usual co-host, who's the vice president of U.S. remote publishing teams at KnowBe4. Just a little under the weather today, so we hope she's feeling better. I want to thank Rex for filling in. So we're going to take a short break, and after that, we'll chat with Kristin Demoranville. She's the CEO and the founder of AnzenSage. She's a woman whose knowledge of primates has served her well, even beyond her time at the Louisville Zoo. We'll be right back.
Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Welcome back. Our guest is Kristin Demoranville. Kristin, welcome to the No Password Required podcast.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, I want to dive into your career and your cybersecurity life, but first, I have to ask, how did your knowledge of primates help you in your cybersecurity life?
Sure. Just a little bit of background because that seems very ominous. I have a degree in environmental management. I kind of focused on more conservation side and behavioral ecology. It was sort of like almost a minor, but I didn't actually qualify for a minor because it didn't exist at that university. But okay. I did all that extra work. I ended up working with an emeritus professor at the Louisville Zoo when I was studying gorillas. So we were studying cortisone levels and bachelor troops to decide if they could live together or not without killing each other, literally. Wow. So I watched 4 male gorillas for almost 2 years, and it was amazing. Probably the best job I ever had with no money. Didn't pay, nothing. And it was great. And watching people watch gorillas was such an education, especially when coming into cybersecurity, because a lot of what we do is mitigating risk through behaviors or understanding behaviors to mitigate risk. I mean, it's either way. So I was on a factory tour in Malaysia. It was an electronics factory. I'll just leave it at that. I'm winking so everybody knows. It was amazing. It was probably my favorite factory I've ever been to, and I probably shouldn't have favorites, but there it is. It was just because of the people. So we're doing a perimeter walk because in an extended security assessment, especially, you need to make sure the physical security is intact. That means checking cameras. That means making sure guards are there. What's going on with the fence is high enough. Picking up the Wi-Fi at a toll booth on the outside of the building is probably not a good thing. Those kind of things. Some people really embrace the walk. I call it the walk around the building, but others do not. Various countries do not like it when I have shown up and done that. But this one in particular was really nice. It was so hot out, walking around. And I said, oh, I noticed you're upgrading your cameras. You're going from the slender box ones to the round, really cool circle ones. Okay. And the guy's like, yeah, but we're having a lot of trouble with it. I said, oh, what's going on? And he goes, we've got a pest problem. I said, you have a pest problem? And he's like, yeah, we have a monkey problem. So I didn't bat a lash. I didn't do anything. I just listened. And he said, yeah, the monkeys have been chewing the cables of the cameras. So we were trying to figure out how we have to protect them because we're losing money ultimately. And it's frustrating because we can't fix them. So I said, well, is it the problem fixed now? They're like, yeah, of course it is. And I said, did you capture the male primary alpha in the group and move them off several miles, and then the females dispersed? And he went, yeah, how did you know that? And I said, oh, I work with primates. I said, I understand this background. I mean, they were just paddis monkeys, so it's super cute, but they're the ones with the really long tails. And it was just really interesting. And it was I won the hearts and minds of that factory instantly because I understood their ailments of pest issues with monkeys. And I also was that tourist that I'd be in various locations where monkeys would be climbing all over shrines and stuff. And I'd be like, don't stand there. No. Okay. All right. You stood there. If that's what happens, if they get urinated all over. Because I can't even tell you how many times I was in the gorilla house and the boys would just be peeing every direction at me. So that also informed my cybersecurity career because I do feel like everybody kind of does that for territory as well. So I feel it's really informed me quite a bit.
That's awesome. I have to ask, how did you, from this sort of intense interest in your college career, right? How did you pivot from that to, I guess we'll call it full-time cyber? How did that evolution happen?
I originally started in IT before the market crashed in 2008, 09, whatever it was. That lovely time when all of us still kind of cringe when we think about it. I just decided to go straight back to school as an adult learner because I wanted to finish my degree. I had bounced around universities from leaving high school on a few. I think actually technically I graduated from my 4th because I just couldn't settle on something I liked. I wasn't invested enough yet. Yep. I literally went from American history to literature to, I don't know, whatever I did. I think I was in liberal arts for a hot minute too. It just depends. So I decided that I was going to get a degree in something I didn't have anything to do with my career. And I ended up in environmental management, which is hilarious because I took a course called environmental technology and there was a crap ton of technology. That's how I kind of really started my OT career, OT security career, is because I was already surrounded by all that stuff, like water treatment facilities and dams and trash and everything else. It really became this kind of cosmic joke in a way because I was like, great, I accidentally picked something I'm going to use eventually later on in my career. And I didn't know it at the time. When I finished school, I was a 5-year adult learner. Okay. I was like, oh crap, student loans are coming back. Thanks, United States. So I have to go work. And the only skill I had was my IT skill. And when I left the IT world, I was an IT director, and I had to humble myself and start back as an analyst. Okay. That was like really gutting, like in your early 30s, like, whoa, like here we go. Yeah. So I started in this bakery company. I literally started from the bottom. Now we're here story, literally. And I learned how to work in a factory. I learned how to deal with people. I learned, baptism by fire in a lot of ways. It was really kind of amazing. And I just kept getting promoted. And then the gentleman who I'm actually engaged with became my boss at one point. Yes, he was my boss. Everybody knows this. It's not like a secret. So
it's a good way to meet. It's a good way to meet people.
Yeah, he was sitting in my old cubicle because I was commuting between Boston and Atlanta for a while. And he was sitting in my old cubicle, and we just got talking. And he's like, hey, have you ever thought about security? And I'm like, no. Those guys are jerks. They just come in, they drop a problem, and they leave. Like, I don't want to be involved in that. Even though I was already doing all the security stuff anyways, I just hadn't put the title security on my life yet. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And he's like, well, okay, well, you should think about it. What else are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I could do database management because that sounds fun. And not that I'm knocking anybody. I just don't think I want to be in a small room or in a cubicle for the rest of my life.
Okay.
So it wasn't until the third time he finally put the job offer in front of me, and I saw the salary and went, yep, sign. And that's how it started. And it was really funny because 6 months into the role, he actually left for another organization. And I was stuck being the senior security leader within this bakery company. We had our first massive breach. And I'll never forget sitting with the corporate lawyer, who's still a friend of mine to this day. And he's like, you're the only one. You're it. You're the only one. I trust to do this and deal with it. So here's the crisis crash team coming in, and you got to get ready. And I was like, what? But thankfully, I knew my business so well. I knew that bakery company so well that it was not a problem. I could switch my mindset very quickly because that's something I learned from watching primates. They're adaptive. Something new gets introduced, like termites. When you put termites as a snack item into a gorilla's area, they freak out. They're like, what is this small thing that's going to destroy my life? But then they take a couple minutes and realize that they're the big and bad ones, and they go over and they eat them. It's fine. You just got to give it a minute, kind of hold up. All right, this is scary, but I'm going to enter this anyways and do it. So that's kind of the roundabout way of how I got into security. And it's sort of just fallen from there. And I've done just about every job except for the hacking side. Okay. I know enough to be dangerous and break something and maybe fix it. So I just stay away from that side. But I respect it and I can speak to it, which is good. I've just had this great career.
So as a kid, you must have had a passion for animals like I did. Side note, I actually met Jack Hanna at the Columbus Zoo when I was a kid. So I was pretty much destined to do that instead of what I'm doing now, I guess. But I would think that as a kid, once you climb that mountain and you're working, at the zoo and working with animals and getting to do cool things and meet cool people, that you would stay there forever. What was the thing that made you want to try something else?
Money. I had to go because of student loans. There was no way I could sustain a non-paying job and do this. I mean, I did volunteer at the National Zoo and the commissary way back in the day when I first started my journey into zoos, which was amazing because it sort of informs me on what I do now because it's all about food safety. So it's pretty incredible how, this is why I tell people follow the breadcrumbs of your life because they're seriously going to lead you to where you are right now. It is crazy to think about. I really loved whales, Rex. I loved whales when I was a kid and I had this kindred spirit with them. It's probably because, my sun sign is a Pisces, if everybody wants to get weird about it. So I really thought that I was going to be an oceanographer. I would tell you that at 5 years old.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid and we go on whale watches, I'd be up telling the naturalists that they got the weight wrong of a whale because I just couldn't stand that someone was wrong about a whale. And my poor parents, I swear, they probably lost me on boats all the time and probably thought I was like swimming with them at one point. So I really thought that my career was going to go there. And then life happens and you go through school and you have some horrible people that come into your life, like some teachers and stuff, and tell you that you don't know science and you're dumb and that you need to be a housewife and your only value is going to be a mother and all these other things. And I just sort of fell apart with my science career, if you will, even though it's hilarious. I have a science degree now. But so I really just kind of didn't go back to it. And it's really great, though, that I ended up working with the animals anyways, kind of in an accident way, if you will. Even though it ended up being gorillas, I'm still really thrilled by that because they're amazing.
Kristen, it's one thing to take on the role of the information security professional. It's another thing to start your own thing, right? So what led you to found AnzenSage? Like, how did you come to that decision and what was that like?
Sure. Earlier this year, January, I've actually only had the company open and living for the last 10 months, almost 11 months now. I really had this moment where I started to see we weren't doing a service to our customers or our clients in consulting as a whole. And I'm not picking on any consulting firm specifically. I want to make that clear in case somebody wants to come for me. But I really feel like we do too much broadness. We're too generalized. And I think in industrial environments, specifically more critical infrastructure, we need to be specialized. Now, we've done a great job in oil and gas and automotive, right? Those are good. Like we've actually got standards. Things are working. People are talking same common language. It's beautiful, right? But we kind of forgot about water and food in a way. And that's super frustrating to me. Because I know I need to eat. I'm sure all of you need to eat. I like my family to continue eating, but it has to be safe food for everyone and keep the supply chain safe. Something I learned in my environmental classes, obviously, is that everything is a cycle. We have one water cycle. That's it. It's not like we're going to have magical new water that comes from a glacier that melts. That's not how it works. It's all one water. That's it. This is all the water we've got. That's it. It goes up into the atmosphere, comes back down, and starts over again. And I think that people need to realize their food cycle is very similar, moving forward. And we keep mucking it up, whether it's, contamination, adulterated, food fraud is a huge problem now. All these other cool food defense things that I could tell you that wouldn't necessarily resonate, but we're really doing a bad job of protecting our food in the long run. We have some amazing people that are on the front lines, but there's nobody really there. So I thought, well, wait a minute. Cybersecurity is part of food protection because the world is digital now, for the most part. Yeah. And then I've been having conversations with cybersecurity professionals and just other general people, and nobody realizes how automated our food system is or how technology driven it is and how AI and all that has been there for a really long time. I mean, and I always use the example of we used to push a plow and then we had a horse in front of it or a cow or whatever. And then all of a sudden now we have automated autonomous tractors. I think we missed like a jump there. So people don't make that connection. I was sitting on a podcast not too long ago and he literally thought that everything was done by hand. I was like, you think that what? And cows live in happy red barns, right? Oh. And he's like, yeah, I mean, that's the great lie, right? Consumers are not supposed to know. So that's what's frustrating for me specifically with choosing to start AnzenSage is now I'm combating all this disinformation, misinformation. And I didn't know there was so much of the food industry until just recently. So there's this huge need. And there was a gap. I haven't met one consulting firm that's actually doing this on just straight in laser focus here. Plenty of generalists do it. I mean, I'm sure any security professional could go in and give a list of controls or help give strategy or advise on anything. But have they ever worked in the food industry?
Yeah.
I mean, most people in these environments don't want to talk to you unless you have. And I've had that confirmed multiple times. Yeah. But we've got other problems, too, where there's language barriers and there's culture, considerations to be made as well. because food is so emotional and culturally driven. And there's all these different aspects. And I spend a lot of time talking to food protection. I love these people. I think that they don't get enough credit for what they do. They see everything and understand everything that's happening in their environment. And it's really, I just want to come alongside and help them. Like on a personal, like mission level, like I want to help them. I want to make sure that I can eat safe food. And I want everybody else to eat safe food. So the company was really born out of going to a conference and having these conversations just kind of on accident. I was just kind of like the token person sent to this conference about food safety. And I fell in love with it. And I thought, oh my God, I've worked at a bakery company. Oh my God, I understand what you're talking about. Oh, wow, this makes sense. And so I originally was like, wow, I need to do something. So after a lot of consideration, after I left my last role, I was like, let's just jump in. Let's just try, and that's why I started, my podcast, Bites and Bytes, because I wanted to have those conversations between cybersecurity and food protection, because clearly we're not talking. Like, this is very clear, and it's very stressful for them because they're not getting the support they need to keep themselves safe too. So it just became this huge thing underneath me. It's like a movement, really. And I don't mean to sound so dramatic, but it does feel that way quite often because, again, it's food.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of what you say resonates with what I see in my practice, right? When I'm working with clients and the clients are trying to hire specialized folks to work with them on their industry, and they get frustrated because, we'll talk to a vendor and they'll say, have you ever done this? And it's whatever their industry is. And they'll say, we do all industries, no problem. But there really is a difference between the education industry, banking industry, right? And then when you get into critical infrastructure, like it really is different. A company that's importing a product from South America to the US that's going to be consumed by human beings versus a company that makes something that's never going to travel outside the borders and will never go inside a human body. Like it really is radical. And I think, do you think that this specialization is the future? You mentioned oil and gas, right, as one other industry where it's already happening. But do you think we're going to see specialization for lack of a better word, cyber consulting in other industries?
Yeah, I think so. My gut instinct, and I've had a few conversations about this as well, that people are tired of the generalization. They need that specialization, like you just said. But on top of that, it's the price, right? The Big Four charges so much. And again, I'm not picking on them. They do what they do, and they've been doing what they're doing for a long time and will continue. But what about like a medium-sized food company that's doing refrigerated food at a airport, right?
Yeah.
They don't have millions to drop on a project for asset management or any type of threat detection, right? Or any type of advisory, because most of the time it comes down to what's priority. And they don't want just a report. They want to have a conversation. They want it to be interactive. They want someone to come in and do a scenario training that has the same knowledge that they do, and actually do the due diligence and those kind of things. I always use automotive as a really good example. When they came out with some of those standards, it created a common rhetoric and a common language across all of them. We have done that with oil and gas too, but there's nothing that's in like a holistic space for food specifically or agriculture specifically. I mean, there is an ag IT, which is great. So that's helping with some different things. Yeah. But moving forward, I think that we really need to have that kind of deeper conversation of how cybersecurity is part of food protection. We have to continue to have that conversation together. And then I think you're going to see more hybrid roles, especially in food, where you'll have a cybersecurity professional that's also trained on food safety. Doesn't mean they do a food safety job. It means they're educated on it. And I think you're going to see more food safety professionals or food protection professionals have more cybersecurity knowledge. They're actually pretty savvy already. So it's really quite interesting to have those type of conversations. And their role, their job, people who make food, grow it or make it or any of that, you can't get more personal. I had a guest that just said this to me. Can't get more personal than that. I am making things that you ingest. You can't get more personal. And that's the part that kind of I keep rotating in my head. Yeah. None of the other critical infrastructure except for water do that. We don't ingest oil. If you do, you're weird. And why would you do that? And, things like that. But like, this is really personal and it affects everybody. It affects even animals. like I said, at the zoo, when I used to work at the commissary, I learned about food safety there and what, how to cut various fruit because those stupid birds. But those, those things were really important to start to know. And I didn't know that you're not supposed to do whatever with this particular vegetable, that you don't wash it ahead of time and you have to cut it a certain way. I didn't know that. Those kind of things are important at education level. And they're also not teaching this at a young age in schools. And it's same with cybersecurity. We're sort of teaching cybersecurity in elementary school, but not really. So how do we do that? So where's the blend go with that? So again, like I told you, I'm going down this incredible rabbit hole of like basically why I started my business, because there's too many things to do. And it's just about communication and constantly talking. I adore working with factories, right? Okay. And essentially, I think this is where the generalists have trouble. Is a factory, right? Stuff comes in, a raw product comes in, some stuff happens in between, and then it comes out something different on the other end. So that people assume that's what a factory is, and that's all it is. It's nothing important. But because it's food, because you have all the regulations and safety factors around it, it's not. It's not the same as an electronics factory or even a semiconductor factory. They're entirely different. Even though factory is still the word, but that's just the general term of saying like car, cat, dog.
A home, right. It's just
exactly.
Maybe you can't answer this just because of your role, but like, what do you think about the role of like the EPA or the FDA making rules that apply generally versus an industry standard that develops by consensus that we all sort of just agree to? Do you have a preference for one or the other, or a prediction?
So, Jack, this could be a whole episode in itself. Because the FDA does food and drug, and there's a lot of people who believe that the F needs to be taken out of the FDA because they need a separate food. There's also the USDA, the FDA they regulate differently. USDA, I think, does everything, including catfish, and then FDA does like the processing part kind of thing. It's very overlapped and confusing. I met some of these people recently, and I just am in awe that they even have understanding of what they're doing, because like, wow, there's a lot going on here. And then you have the Department of Homeland Security, which is trying to do an audit over all of them to understand that and how they fit into that process, because they're not a regulator. They're just going to be like, the cheerleader and trying to get people to the right places and escalate the really bad stuff like super contaminations and disasters of, what do they call it? Catastrophic disasters, which is just like, what does that look like?
It's the worst kind of, it's the worst kind of disaster.
I don't want to think about what that looks like with food, because like JBS in itself was pretty much a catastrophe. So when that ransomware hit and the meat was all kind of hanging out, and I said meat, meaning cows, like cows were chilling and they didn't know what to do with them. And then you get stressed out meat and there was no holding areas. Then you got runoff everywhere into the water stream. And as we learned earlier, it's one water cycle, people. So all that's going in. This is why you don't pee in a river. So anyways, it's super interesting too. Like, it's interesting, right? Like you kind of Absolutely. Are like, oh, well, okay, why does the government have this together? That's because like 98% of the food industry is privately owned. Huh. And there's these big conglomerates that sit over it. Like there's only 4 major egg houses essentially in the country, like companies, and everything else is subsidiaries of those. So you could imagine that attackers and hackers would want to go after these small little ones that just bring up to like the big boys, or just be disruptive in general. And I'm thankful for right now. I don't know. I hope this doesn't change anytime soon, but let's be real. We got to be prepared that they're financially motivated at the moment just to keep punching up to the big boys. But what happens when like there aren't, and they just want to be destructive and hurt people? And what if we piss off a country, which clearly we do that quite often, but what happens there? I mean, we've seen it with Ukraine, how they attacked their infrastructure first, and said
they're making grain. They're making huge amounts of grain that are sitting or not. That's exactly the problem, right?
And then you can't have that product sit for that long, because I learned something. There's different types of mites that go after certain types of like flour and things like that. I didn't know these things until I started working in the industry years ago. And so you can't have products sit. And then if you have products that you have to have it constantly, checked and things like that. Well, if you're in the middle of a war, nobody's going to be checking it, they're going to get out of there. So that product's gone. There's nothing to it. So that farmer spent all that time growing to only have it tossed. That's gutting to think about, right? Because ultimately farming and ranching are just about balancing. You just want to balance your books by the end of the day. And nobody has respect for them until they sit there and watch a show like Yellowstone, which ends up just being murderous, which, okay, there. Or if you watch the UK version of Clarkson's Farm, you start to understand, there's a lot going on here. We have a lot going on. And then it kind of romanticizes it, but it's still you're still walking in mud and you're still, dealing with stuff. Nobody wants to go into a slaughterhouse and do cybersecurity. Nobody wants to stand at a computer covered in blood. That doesn't sound fun. I mean, I've did it in a bakery. Mine was covered in sugar dust. I'm grateful for that at least. But it's the same concept. We have to have people that are willing to go in and make these decisions and help rather than just arbitrarily, here's your report. Blessings upon you. Call us when you need help again. I want to be that person that does more because, again, it goes back to basic humanness.
Part of your project now is doing the podcast, the Bites and Bytes podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast and about who you're going to have on it and what your plans are for it?
Sure. I actually have some really amazing people that are on it, and I've managed to connect with some old colleagues as well that I haven't talked to in 10 years. My first guest actually came out of the bakery company that I worked for. She's still there. And we had this just beautiful conversation about digital transformation and what that means and how ridiculous it can be and how, people don't understand the culture of this because, again, it's personal because you're ingesting this product. I have some great guests lined up, some big names in the industry that you've eaten the food, but you don't know who they are kind of thing. And I also have some professors coming on. I have some change management, digital transformation people. I have some IT director that's coming on from a farm. Wow. I have some really, really cool people and more cool people, actually. But a lot of them are in food defense, quality for supply chain. The professor is actually very famous. He is the food safety icon. He's a food star. He was actually part of the Poison documentary on Netflix. Oh, wow. He's becoming a good friend of mine. He's a lovely man. And then I'm going to have some cybersecurity people. Okay. I think I'm going to have some people that are maybe a little controversial that are going to push some, questions at me and at me back at them, which should be very entertaining and hopefully enlightening because I'm trying to get the cybersecurity community to understand this is an issue. We need to care about it. And the second part is the food people are already yeah, we know that we need cybersecurity. Just where you been? Hurry up. What are we going to do? So it's actually really been interesting. And a lot of it comes down to is they're asking for education. They're asking for a lot of, hey, I need to understand. And they're asking for a lot of scenario trainings that include a recall or include a contamination or include a fraud or something like that really ties it all together and getting the right people at the table. Because I'll tell you, the C-suites and the boards don't get it. I mean, we've already talked about this a lot in cybersecurity that there aren't enough cyber people on the boards. Yeah. But now there's not enough people who understand digital transformation and what that does to food on the board. And it scares the living crap out of me because these are the people that are signing checks and these are the people that are making decisions that are going to impact the operator on the cutting line, and that's the thing that scares me. I applaud that they want to be automated, automate things like a cutting line, for example. But at the same time, at what potential risk, right? Because we're not mitigating risk properly if we're not doing our due diligence with it. Because I can tell you right now, and I'm sure other people that are listening to this have found the weirdest ways to get into robot lines in factories via file share or just tumbling through a printer, Printers suck. I will continue to say that for the rest of my life. They are awful. And every time someone has ever put one up in a factory environment, I was right there, reprimanding like a school teacher.
What do we need to print for? Why are we printing? Exactly. What are we doing?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, the podcasting journey has been really incredible because I didn't realize how much I was going to learn. The knowledge set for me alone is invaluable. it's invaluable. And I'm so excited about it. I'm sure you both feel the same way. Every time we talk to a guest, it's like something new shakes out. And yeah, but it's strange to be a cybersecurity creator. Like, that's a little weird. Like, people keep putting that tag on me and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, sure. I'm just trying to talk to people. That's really what I'm trying to do.
Whatever will get people to listen. I say sometimes, like now I'm talking to you, I forget we're even recording it, which is usually a sign that I'm really interested. But just to kind of wrap up this sort of segment here, do you have, maybe you can share with us a question that you're planning on asking your guests regularly? What's a question that you're going to kind of try to get at the heart of for your
Sure. Actually, every guest gets asked the same iceberg question. What's your favorite food and what's your favorite food memory? Wow. Because I want people to make the connection that food is personal. I mean, they do, the guest does, they get it. But you'd be surprised when people tell me. I have a guest who's actually coming on who's lost their child to E. coli poisoning from the Jack in the Box
oh my goodness.
Incident, I should say, in Washington State. And he is so stoic about it. And so the way he's like, I didn't want to waste my son's life. I wanted to do this. I wanted to be here for these moments. I want to help protect. And the fact that he's actually sat in a room with the CEO of Jack in the Box since then is like, I don't have the words to describe what these people do. They are so incredible and how humble they are and how they do things. So those are the two questions I always ask for sure, because like I said, it humanizes the moment, because I don't want it to be like, oh, security controls and blah. Like, it's boring. Like, we all know. Or tell me the worst security incident that's ever happened to your company. I really want to hear it. Like, I'm not going to do that. If they want to talk about it, cool, but I'm not going to, push it out of them. I really just want to know what they do and why they do it. Example would be, I had a guest, my next guest actually is talking about how chocolate and ice cream isn't actually really chocolate. It's a different kind of chocolate. Huh. Mind blown in that moment. I was like, wait, what? I need to get an ice cream scientist on here right now. Like,
I've got to listen to this because I'm excited about figuring out the answer to that one. I just always thought it was. Yeah. It's not just chocolate that gets melted and mixed in. It's something else. Oh, man.
No, it's not. It's kind of like when I worked at the bakery company, they had a machine that would suspend the batter in the for a moment while they put in the blueberries. It had to be like 8 blueberries or something like that. But it had to be suspended in order to make sure you got the 8 blueberries. Otherwise, it would just be like a clump like you make it at home.
Got it.
And there was so much money and so much engineering that went into that machine. It was like the crucial part of that particular machine, but nobody knew that because nobody talked to the engineers. So when you talk to the engineers, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is section critical right here," And I'm like, "Is this internet connected?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Like, let's make sure. Let's make sure it's not a problem."
Kristen, we're going to take a short break now, but we're going to return and we're going to have our lifestyle polygraph. So please stay with us.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
Welcome back. As many of you know, the Lifestyle Polygraph is a test used by the federal government to determine if a person is worthy of learning some of our nation's most important secrets. Here, we use it for slightly lower stakes, to determine whether our guests can join our fantasy cybersecurity squad. Kristen, are you ready for the Lifestyle Polygraph?
I'm ready.
All right. We'll get started with one of my favorites. The best thing my parents gave me was blank.
They let me keep my innocence for a lot longer than I think most people could. I was allowed to be a kid for a long time. I didn't have to grow up immediately. And even in the parts that I did grow up quickly on, I don't think it was detrimental to me. I think it was very helpful to be an adult. So I thanked my father actually recently for that. I said, thank you for letting me keep my innocence for a long time. The world wasn't so abrasive right away, and then I was able to discover it. And it's pretty incredible thinking the fact that my father's a fireman or was a fireman. And we would talk about calls and, ambulance runs and things like that. So I wasn't desensitized. I was desensitized in some ways, but the fact that they allowed me to keep my innocence and my imagination, I think has served me so well as an adult.
Kristen, given your sort of interest in animals and nature, were you outside a lot as a kid?
I was one of the last generations of feral kids, pre-internet. And I know a lot of people don't know what that is anymore, but we went outside and we played with sticks and leaves and created these magical places that, we had a huge, I shouldn't say huge, we had an acre worth of land in the backyard, and being in the center of a small town in New England was kind of bougie, if you will. But we had a zip line, and we would race in like Peter Pan and fairy dust with like crumpled leaves. And like, there was these whole complex stories, and all the neighborhood kids got into it. And there'd be like certain sections and rooms that would be denoted by different things. And we rode our bikes all the time. And it was great. I mean, you were out, you just come home after dark, come home when the sun sets, and that would never happen nowadays, of course. But I remember skating my knee on my bike for the first time and rode a half a mile home with like this bloody knee. And I was like so proud of myself. But I loved being outside, and I have such a fascination with wildlife. I probably know more bird species than I tell people. And I'm wildlife certified through the National Zoo. So I know way more about squirrels than I think most humans should know. Which actually is quite informative when you're just randomly somewhere and you just say something. People are like, wait, what? How did you know that? And I'm like, yeah, gray squirrels are the only squirrels that are black and white. And people are like, wait, but they're black. What? It's still a gray squirrel. Like, oh, weird. What about a red squirrel? I'm like, no, that's a red squirrel. Those things are jerks. But I just couldn't imagine a life where I was just trapped behind my PC. But now, like, I have that life because I'm here and the pandemic and all that stuff. But yeah, I loved being outside. I adored it.
If the goal were maximum professional satisfaction, other than protecting the water supply, what food item would you choose to protect?
On a personal level, pineapples, which take a lot of water. So I'm ultimately helping the water supply. But no, pineapples. I've just always loved them. I don't know why. It's a weird.
They don't look like they should be so delicious from the outside. That's why it's just it's like a food you would find in an alien planet, but then it's so gorgeous and delicious inside, right? It just doesn't seem to match up. I just love that incongruity about it.
And also, like, who thought to eat that?
Yeah.
I often wonder that when I'm having food in general, like, who thought to put these ingredients together? Like, my birthday this year, we went out to dinner and I had caviar and coconut ice cream together, which sounds super expensive. It wasn't that bad. Relax, everybody. But it was that salty sweet play. And it's probably why I like pineapple on pizza. Yes, I am that one. All right. Yep. Everybody come for me in the comments because it's that salty sweetness. Sometimes I'll put bacon on it. I mean, again, you got to extend the salty sweetness. I don't know what it is about pineapple. It just sort of, makes me happy to eat it. Is that weird? Like, probably weird, but that's how I see it. And I've been to a few pineapple fields, and that was amazing to watch that as well.
They're like what are they, like bushes? They're like, they don't grow the way you think they do, right?
They're kind of like little trees, I guess is how I'll describe it to you. Like bushy trees. I don't know. I'm sure somebody's listening on an agriculture side and they're just rolling their heads. Whatever. You guys are dumb. Like, I'm sorry. I haven't grown pineapples in my life, but I know you can grow them inside certain houses and climates now. Like, you can grow them in Florida, obviously.
I've got one in my garden.
So they're like a weird little plant. You can even get them and ship them to people. I actually looked at one the other day and I was like, do I want to grow a pineapple? I'm already growing enough. It's
kind of fun to watch it, but it takes forever. Like it's like a 2-year process, I'm told. That like,
I don't know if I can make that commitment.
Yeah. Like my grandfather actually did it. Like, he cut the top off of the one, like from the grocery store, and then, you just plant the top of it and it will grow. Like, ours is growing, but it's so like, it's going to be a while. I'm looking at it grow and it's healthy and looks good, but it's going to be, I'm not going to harvest that baby tomorrow. That's for sure. Yeah.
I will say, though, a close second would be a passion fruit, by the way, because I was horseback riding in Hawaii. And again, this sounds really extreme, but here it is. Here's my life.
That's awesome.
I was horseback riding like in backcountry in Hawaii on Kauai. And we were stopped because there was passion fruit blossoms, which passion fruit grows from the blossom, like most fruit. And it was amazing. Like this particular flower was so fragrant and amazing. And I realized that I had killed the passion fruit, like it was never going to grow from this flower because she picked it and handed it to me. And we walked down a little further and there was a bunch of passion fruits and we had some. We were just riding horses in like the middle of nowhere, Kauai. And my horse's name was Thor. And that's the only thing I remember about that whole ride. And he was crazy. So like, good times.
That's a top 5 horse name. But 2, just as an aside, Thor.
He looked like Thor.
Yeah.
He looked like, I can see why they named him that. But he was a big baby too at the same time. That's
a great start. I'm horseback riding in Hawaii, right? That's a great start. George Clooney's there with me and The Rock is there too. And we're looking for passion fruits. What we do.
What is your favorite way to waste time?
2 ways. I love to read, which is hilarious because I hated reading when I was a kid. And now I like reading as an adult. And probably the second thing would be gaming. I still game. I've been gaming since computers really allowed me to. And when I was hacking into my dad's computer to sneak onto Leisure Suit Larry back in the day. But yeah, I mean, it's like mindless gaming. I'm used to be hardcore, but I cannot I just can't. But it's something that I really it's mindless and it's nice, but also gives me commonality with my stepkids. So it helps me talk about how they feel about a certain game is coming out or what they're doing on the current game because I understand the systems and I can at least speak the speak. It's funny though because my fiance wasn't a gamer, so I'll say something like there's something at the door or whatever. I'll say ink, which means incoming, and he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, never mind. I'm like, it's fine. But then again, he says a lot of things that I don't particularly understand either because he was in the Royal Air Force and I don't understand any of that either. So basically the entire time we're here, everybody's confused because, life. But no, seriously, I really have fallen back in love with reading. I think I'm on my 21st book since June. Awesome. It's what I do. It gets me away from this, and it gets me away from technology and I can just sit down and go into a fantasy world of whatever's happening. And I don't have to think about anything else for, that time. And the beauty is I read on a Kindle and it tells you how much longer the chapter is. So I'm like, oh, I've got 7 minutes. I could do that. And then it turns into 20 and you're like, oh, I'll read this next one. It's only 5 minutes. I love that. Yay to Kindle for that because and I feel like I'm being productive. Like I could get through 5 chapters and it's only going to take 30 minutes. Like
it's like the gamification of making yourself better. Like it really is. Like I started using a Kindle right at the beginning of the pandemic. I'd had it for like a year before I hadn't picked the thing up, but then started at the beginning of the pandemic. And now it's like one more chapter. Right. And then all of a sudden you find 5 hours have passed and it's 1 a.m. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I have that problem too. I read when I'm going to bed and it's nice because you have it, it's lit. You don't have to bother your partner. And I'm like, oh crap, it's 1 a.m. Like, oh no, how much longer do I got of this book? I think I'm almost done with it. Oh, I'll just push through. It's fine. Or I'm like, oh, wait till morning. I'll save it because then it'll be really like a happy morning or whatever. Unless you hate the end of the book and then it destroys your day. But yeah, no, actually reading at night has really helped because before I was like a doom scroller, right? Like we all did it during the pandemic. We just constantly were looking and switching to reading has been so much better for my sleep and like me as a person. I wake up happier. I'm much more engaged during the day, I think. And because I can look forward to reading again, right? Something to like a reward for like all the good stuff I did all day long.
I like that you're considered a thought leader in cybersecurity and in business. Now, I realize that there's no specific process for a title like that. How did you know when you would climb the thought leader mountain?
I think when somebody told me I was a thought leader, to be truthful, because I kind of looked at them like, you don't want to know what's going on in my head. Like, are you crazy? But then I realized that they found value in me and my thoughts. And that's when I knew I had made it. I had a woman approach me at a woman in ICS evening at the S4 conference last year. And granted, there was alcohol involved, but I'm still going to put this here. And she walked up and she goes, "You really inspire me." She's like, and she went on this like long conversation with me. And it was, and it wasn't just like my professional life. It was like my personal life too. Cause I'm not afraid to share things that are going on because I think we have to humanize what we do, especially in the food industry. And it was just this moment of, oh God, people are watching me. Holy crap. I guess I do have value. And I get reminded of that quite often. And I often wonder when I'll become desensitized to that, like when it will just become part of the normal routine for me, just for people to say, hey, I really valued what you're doing and I found value today, but I don't want it to. I always want it to hit me like right in the chest, right at the heartstrings for sure.
It's a responsibility too, right?
It really is.
You don't want to lose that.
Yeah. And I think I try to remind myself too, that people don't actually know the whole situation. I don't know their whole situation. And I think that especially as a leader, because it's the thought leader, the leader part, leaders have to make tough choices sometimes, and leaders have to do things that really just are uncomfortable. I've unfortunately had to terminate friends of mine before, and I've been terminated by friends and other things like that in my career. And being told that I am too much sometimes is hard. And I think as a leader, you have to remind yourself, how would I want to be treated in this situation? And that's kind of how I look at it as. So when someone says to me like, "Oh, you're awesome. This is great. Thank you so much." Like, and I always respond back, I'm like, "You're awesome. Thanks." Like, this is good. I love this dialogue. Let's keep going. And that's amazing.
So last one, what skill or hobby have you always wanted to pick up, but time or weird circumstances have not allowed you to do it?
Finally learning Japanese probably would be one thing I've sort of regretted. Well, actually, no, I probably fully regret that, but I just haven't had time to sit down and study it because it literally has to be studied. It's not just like picking up any of the other like romantic languages that kind of all mean or close to each other in terms of speech. That is an entirely different skill set altogether. Yeah, it would have served me well. I would have been able to understand what was going on when I was in all those factories in Japan, or to deal with different culture issues, and it would have been nice.
Kristen, how is Japan doing versus the U.S. in food safety? What's different about their approach?
So actually, it's funny you bring that up because Japan just had a huge milk contamination. It just happened. Oh, wow. Somebody had accidentally slipped in or something happened in processing. This is just from what I've read. So if anybody knows better than me, please God tell me. But they was unpasteurized and pasteurized met, and that's not supposed to happen. Okay. So basically raw milk got into the pasteurized milk and it got sent out to school kids. Now, nobody's passed, nobody's died from it or anything like that. Everybody's just gotten really sick. So they are still struggling like we are, I guess is what I'll say. I don't know if that was an intentional contaminant. I don't know any of those details. Obviously, that's sort of like asking someone to tell you the details of a security breach, literally. But for now, they are learning just like the rest of the world. And like I said, it's always humans that muck it up. It's the same thing with cybersecurity, right? Yeah. Our risks are always human related. It's not just the tech. I mean, tech's not going to get sentient and be like, "Oh, I create virus." Like, it's not going to do that. At least not right now. Not in our lifetimes for sure. But it's so frustrating because some of this is so avoidable. And this is why I say that you can mitigate food protection issues with cybersecurity controls. Like access control is the easiest one to talk about. You want to access control the allergen areas, peanut versus non-peanut, right? Raw milk stays over here, pasteurized milk stays over here. You can do that with access control, right? Whether it's a system or a door. And I think this is why we need to partner with people. But Japan is pretty amazing. And I feel bad that happened because I'm quite sure that was devastating because milk's important to people. It's good for kids. So, and we're all still learning.
Well, Rex, what do you think? Would Kristen make the cybersecurity squad after these
100%. Like she said, you want somebody around that can keep your food protected. I know I like to eat. Jack, I know you like to eat. So yeah, like she's an absolute lock. So yeah, welcome to the team, Kristen. We're thrilled to have you here.
Awesome. Do I get like a t-shirt or something? Because that would be really cool.
Funny you mentioned that. Yes. And I will get with you after the show to send you our thank you package.
Kristen, thank you for joining us. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Probably the easiest is LinkedIn. I know that's cheesy, but like we're all on it. So, and I have a very memorable last name. So just go ahead and like get to me there. You could check out my website, same as my company name. My email is my first name at my company name, which is AnzenSage. Podcast, please listen to my podcast, Bites and Bytes. We're on everything, just like this is on everything because, distribution. And you can reach me there. You can carrier pigeons. I mean, if you want to show up at my house, fine. But if you're showing up at my house, please bring wine because I don't really want you not to, be in my house unless you bring me a gift.
Cons, I don't know this person. Pros, they brought some wine. So we're good. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. We really appreciate you coming on the show. It was great to talk to you. We learned a ton.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
That brings us to the end of the show. But first, Rex, what did you learn today?
Oh, Jack, I learned a lot of things. I learned that this is a lot harder than it looks. I learned that I appreciate you and Kaylee even more than I appreciated you yesterday. And I also learned that you can become a thought leader once somebody values your opinion. Like I had no idea. I thought it was more complicated than that. I thought there was a form that you had to fill out or something. I thought there was, a more formal procedure to it. But I guess, once you are valued by somebody, you can be a thought leader. So I like that. And also a willingness to make difficult decisions and a willingness to just throw your opinions out there are certainly helpful too.
Well, I learned today that if monkeys are attacking your electrical wires, that you need to locate the alpha, capture the alpha, and then just relocate them a couple miles away. Easier said than done. Easier said than done, I think. But maybe what I'll do in the work environment is if I'm having trouble with an alpha team member, I'll just not invite him or her to the Zoom meeting, and we'll proceed apace. So there's always applications for this stuff in the usual work environment. Well, for the entire No Password Required team, I'm Jack Clabby. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. And if you know someone who might like it, please share it with them. The show is produced by Cyber Florida, and a special thank you goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod. All opinions expressed by the No Password Required podcast participants are their own and do not exclusively represent the views and opinions of Cyber Florida.